On today's show, when will we see Darren Fox on the court again? Move over, Monty McNair. Barry and I are taking all the GM calls from here on out. And we'll talk about the most famous player to never play for the Sacramento Kings, Ben Simmons. That's all coming up on the Row Report.
Welcome back. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to Royal Rebounds, a YouTube channel for Kings fans by Kings fans. This is the Royal Report, a Sacramento Kings sports talk show. This is episode 14. Welcome in, everybody. If you are a Kings fan, make sure you smash up that like button down below and hit that subscribe button as well.
Once again, thanks for joining us, Royal family, on another fantastic Friday. By now, you know the drill. We're going to start with some league news. Barry, let's kick it off.
All right. Draymond Green signs a deal with Turner Sports as an analyst. Big news here. I know the Warriors are doing great on the court. It seems like their players are doing well off the court as well, Cal.
Yeah, exciting deal for Draymond. I think everybody appreciates his value on television, and he pairs well next to Shaq, Kenny, and Charles for sure.
Defensive players, they just know the game, man.
Yeah.
They can just talk their way out of anything.
To news on the court, Kings fans have become very well accustomed to seeing the other team score a lot of points. Well, on Wednesday night, the Charlotte Hornets set a new franchise record, scoring 158 points on the road against the Indiana Pacers. Kelly Oubre Jr. was phenomenal in his first game back after missing a period of time, scoring 39 points off the bench, hitting 10 of 15 three-point attempts. LaMelo Ball was also tremendous. He added a triple-double with 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 13 assists. Barry, give me your reaction to a team posting a franchise record while not playing the Kings.
It's pretty amazing. And, knowing the Hornets and their lack of defense, they probably needed every point to win this game. I know the Kings set a season high against the Hornets earlier this season. So, the Hornets are in a ton of high-scoring games this year. Moving on here, Joel Embiid is having another dominant season. He is making a case for MVP this season, and he is absolutely carrying the Sixers to the playoffs without Ben Simmons. Tobias Harris is now officially back from injury, and Embiid just keeps doing his thing, Cal.
He sure does. One of the more underrated players, I think, in the NBA right now, which is kind of hard to imagine given how well he's performed over the last few seasons. But his numbers are fantastic, and he's got a team in the playoff hunt, more than the playoff hunt. They're in the playoffs. Without Ben Simmons going into the season, many people thought it was going to be an uphill battle for them, but they're riding the large, broad shoulders of Joel Embiid.
They sure are.
Well, you may have missed Terence Davis getting hurt the other night against the Boston Celtics because your TV was broken due to the fact that you threw something at it, as the Kings were down by 60 at one point during the game. However, Terence Davis went up for a shot at the rim early on in the game and had a very hard fall. An MRI has revealed that he now has tendon damage in his right wrist, and he's going to miss an extended period of time. Very, very unfortunate, given that Davis was finally starting to get into a rhythm and was one of the few bright spots from this team for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate, but I'm glad to hear he is going to be okay. It was a rough fall on his head. He also got some stitches to close an abrasion above his eye as well. He was playing really incredible basketball. He set a new career high, 35 points against Detroit. He followed that up with 22, and he was also the Kings' leading scorer with 7 points in that game that he did go down. And we also saw another Davis, Anthony Davis, fall on his wrist last night and tweak it as well. Calvin, do you see a theme here between Davis and wrist injuries?
Well, Anthony Davis has spent a ton of time on the injured reserve list for the past few years. Incredibly unfortunate for the Lakers that he comes back and immediately ends up right back on the injured list. but certainly not a good time to have the last name Davis and have a wrist.
Speaking of injured reserve, the entire Kings fan base is moving to the injured reserve after this last week of basketball. It was horrendous. 0-3 for the week. Losses to the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis. A huge loss to the Celtics where they were down 60 points at one point in the game. Their obviously worst loss of the entire season. They follow that up with a big loss to Atlanta where the Kings give up 46 points in the second quarter, only scoring 17, and they were down by as much as 30 in this game, Cal.
Yeah, we all thought last week was bad with losses to the Rockets and the Pistons. Where could we go from there? Well, I'll tell you what, the Sacramento basketball team said, hold my beer. We'll be down 60 to the Celtics and 30 to the Hawks on consecutive nights. Yes, they're much better teams than the Rockets and the Pistons, but that's the question, is where do we go from here? Darren Fox has missed the last few games. If I was him, there is absolutely no reason for me to get back on the court and play with this team that is incredibly uncompetitive. They just look broken out there, Barry, mentally, physically, spiritually. Monte McNair obviously has a lot of pressure on him as the trade deadline is approaching rapidly, but this team just looks an absolute mess right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings flat out stink at this point. I don't know any other way to say it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Some change needs to happen, and they suck, Cal.
They sure do. I'll tell you what, a lot of teams that suck, they try to lose on purpose. So the question now becomes, as the trade deadline is approaching, what does this team do? Do they try to make a type of trade that will salvage the season, potentially give them an opportunity to get back into the playoffs? Or is it time to actually look at losing games as an advantage? This team is now 13th in the Western Conference, sitting directly above the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Houston Rockets to be the worst team in the Western Conference. Many Kings fans, and I'm sure all the players, did not expect them to be in this position at this moment as we sit today. Barry, the question now is, what are the Kings better off doing? Should they try to make that game-saving trade, or do they look at draft picks and draft positioning as the better option here?
Are you suggesting tanking here, Cal?
I never said that word.
Well, at 18-32, I think they've already started tanking at this point. I think the writing is on the wall for Sacramento. They are not a good team. This season is a lost season. They've fired their coach. I think they're going to be making some moves here in the next week and a half or so. But, you know, the question here is whether tanking is the answer or is losing the answer. And, you know, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of tanking. However, that applies to tanking at the start of the season. If I'm midway through the season, you gave it a good effort, you tried your best, you need to look yourself in the mirror and you need to say, hey, we're 18-32, we stink. How am I going to position my team to be best off in the future? If we're not able to compete this season, is it worth chasing a 9 or a 10 seed to hopefully make the play-in tournament and maybe have a chance? The West is not as tough as they've been in the past, with many teams below 500 that are still in that playoff contention. But if I'm the Sacramento Kings, I'm packing my bags and I'm looking towards the NBA draft.
Yeah, it's hard not to, I think, at this point. The only saving grace that this team and the front office has in front of them is that the trade deadline hasn't come and passed yet. And there are still players who are rumored to be available, like Ben Simmons, like Miles Turner, like Domantas Sabonis. All of these people that if you made a deal for, you might not end up making the playoffs, or even if you did, you might be ousted in the first round. But I think a lot of Kings fans would still feel good or feel confident about being in that situation. The problem is they're still not in that situation. So as every day passes and you don't achieve or gain one of those players onto your roster, and you continue to lose, you obviously have to look ahead to the draft and consider what draft positioning is going to be the best for your team. I'm not advocating for losing games intentionally either, but I think that if the Kings don't end up landing one of these big name guys like a Ben Simmons, then you have to look at the fact that you need to play these young guys more. Everyone wants to see Neemias Queta play more. A lot of people have been clamoring for Louis King to get more playing time. It's clear that the current group of players is not working. So it's either roll the dice, make a big trade splash. If that falls through, then play these young guys and look ahead to next season.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last week where the Kings lost 2 games to Houston and Detroit. These are teams that are actually trying to lose games. They're not trying to win games. I don't know what hurts worse, losing a game or losing a game when you're actually trying to win games. The Kings need to choose a direction. Where they're going right now is not working out. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about Calvin's new favorite player, Ben Simmons. Welcome back. We are talking about Ben Simmons, a name that was ousted from our podcast earlier this year. We got tired of talking about him, and we started referring to him as he who had not been named. But we're talking about him here, Cal. Ben Simmons. The last game Ben played in the NBA was June 20th of last year, where he recorded 5 points, 8 rebounds, and 13 assists. It's been about 8 months or so since he stepped foot on an NBA court during a game. The Kings have been one of the most mentioned teams in the last 6 months as far as interest goes for Ben Simmons. We heard about Darren Fox potentially for Ben Simmons, now Tyrese Halliburton and some first-round picks. Calvin, where are you sitting on the Ben Simmons bus at this point?
I'm in the driver's seat at this point, which I never thought that I would say that. It's funny, at the beginning of the year, you and I had completely different opinions on Ben Simmons. And here as we sit today, I think we have completely different opinions on Ben Simmons as well. I was a big worrywart, I guess you could call it, early on in the season about making a deal for a guy who the last time we saw him play really struggled. The fan base jumped on him big time. I realized that Philadelphia, they do that to everyone, but he seemed to take it a little bit harder than most. Obviously, you go through the whole offseason drama. He shows up to practice in sweats with his cell phone in his pocket, completely disengaged. He doesn't look like he's really worked hard to improve the deficiencies in his game. So yeah, you go on and on down the list and all of those red flags come up. However, you fast forward to today. The Kings have now missed the playoffs for 15 straight years. They're on the verge of another season, making it 16 in a row. This team, every year we come into the beginning of the year with a lot of confidence that they will be better, that they'll be able to push for a playoff appearance. They're improved. They've hit on a couple draft picks. Everyone seems to be high on the team, and yet here we are. They just were down by a combined 90 points in 2 consecutive games. I realize they've had a lot of injury issues. COVID has definitely been a big bugaboo for this team as well. But at the end of the day, the only way this team is going to improve is if they take a chance. You can't just rely on free agency and the draft like you've done in years past, because as we can see from previous years' experience, that hasn't been enough to get this team elevated to the level they need to be at in order to be a competitive team. So if you have an opportunity to trade for an all-star level player like Ben Simmons, even though he hasn't played in, like you said, 8-9 months, I think it's an opportunity that the Kings cannot afford to pass up once more, because if they do, they'll be right back in the same position they've been in for the last 15 seasons.
Yeah, you know, Ben Simmons seems to be trying to get out of Philadelphia faster than Will Smith on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But all things aside, Sean Cunningham has said that the Kings are very interested in Ben Simmons. He's not advocating any trading of picks, but he says Monte McNair is going to be traveling with the team this week. The Kings are playing the Sixers, and if he were Monte, he would sit down with Daryl and say, pick any 4 players on this Kings roster. You can have as many as you want, whoever you want out of those 4, but I'm not trading up picks because that's going to handicap us in the future. I don't know if I agree with Sean on this point, but it's very, very interesting to see how much the sentiment has changed on Ben Simmons in just a few months here, Cal.
Yeah, and it's going to continue to change for the next, couple of weeks up until the trade deadline comes and passes. And I think it will continue to change after that, whether Ben Simmons is on the Kings or not. It's going to be very, very interesting to see where he ends up and what he looks like the next time he actually plays in an NBA game. Speaking of a player who has missed a lot of games this season, Rashaan Holmes has missed a team-high 18 games. He has struggled to find that consistent, reliable form that we've come very accustomed to seeing out of him after a career year last year. Barry, you and I were very, very huge advocates for re-signing Rashaan Holmes. I said it was the biggest or number one offseason task that the Kings had this season. Given everything that has happened over the course of this year and where the current state of the team is, do you still believe in Rashaan Holmes as the long-term answer at center for the Kings?
Well, my confidence is waning in Rashaan Holmes. He had a really hot start to this season. We saw a 2020 game from him, which is truly incredible. But since then, he just can't seem to stop getting poked in the eye. And he's been out with multiple injuries. The Kings are 7-11 in the 18 games that he's missed this season. He's averaging 12-8 on the season, which is very similar to his first year in Sacramento, but down from last year's averages. I know he's on a reasonable contract. He needs to get healthy. He needs to get his conditioning back and be ready for Sacramento. But he is no longer on my untouchable list as far as Kings players go.
I agree with that completely. Frankly, I don't think that any player on this Kings roster should be untouchable. I'm not an advocate for trading Darren Fox or Tyrese Haliburton, but if there was a trade in place that I felt like would benefit the team and make them better, I don't think that those players should be considered untouchable either. Rashaan is a very, very valuable player, I think, in the NBA. He brings a lot of really, really good things to a team. But after this team continues to struggle in the same areas that they have for a number of seasons, rim protection, rebounding, consistent interior play, whether it's from your center or your power forward, I think that they should be starting to look at other options here, especially for a team that is so bad at guarding on the perimeter. As great a player as Rashaan Holmes is, he does not provide enough interior defense to make up for the lack of exterior defense that this team has. So if there's a trade available that I think benefits the team and it involves Rashaan Holmes, just like most of the players on this roster, I don't think you can really afford to say no to it.
Yeah, when Rashaan plays well, the Kings usually win. And when Buddy Hield plays well, the Kings usually win these games. But it's so tough to hold your whole team hostage for role players to have to play well for your team to win basketball games. But Calvin, you're talking about trades here. I have a fan-submitted trade from Muhammad. He says, trade Holmes for Precious Achiuwa, Goran Dragic, and a 2022 first-round pick. What are your thoughts on this deal?
I don't like this deal. I just said that there are a lot of trade scenarios I think that you should be willing to look at when it comes to not only Rashaan Holmes, but any player on this roster. However, I don't like this one for a number of reasons. Goran Dragic is another guard, another ball-dominant guard here who makes a lot of money. I don't see how he fits into this current roster. Precious Achiuwa is a player that has some upside and definitely some potential, but I don't agree with trading a consistent starter, or at least the consistent starter that Rashaan Holmes has been over the past couple of years, for someone who has been extremely hit or miss and is still kind of on the up and coming. I believe Precious would be much better served as a reserve player, somebody who comes in for your projected starter. I don't like the swap of Rashaan Holmes, who's already a consistent starter, for somebody like that.
And that draft pick, is going to be a late
good draft pick.
First-round pick. It's coming from Miami, and we just saw them in the finals just a few years ago. and they're a pretty good team.
They're currently the number 1 seed in the East.
Well, moving on here to trade calls, Calvin. You're going to put your GM hat on here. Monty McNair, watch out. February 10th is the official trade deadline. But we're getting a call right now from Mitch Kubchak. He's the current GM of the Charlotte Hornets. Calvin, are you picking up this call? And who are you asking for?
I'm absolutely picking up the call. Spoiler alert, I'm picking up the call from all 29 teams in the league right now. It doesn't matter who the GM is or what the team. If you're the Sacramento Kings, you answer the phone call because that is how bad the state of affairs is in Sacramento. But I think Charlotte would be a great team to try to negotiate a trade for. First and foremost, you've got somebody like Miles Bridges, who the Charlotte Hornets could lose for absolutely nothing after doubling down on himself and not taking a contract extension. He's had a career year, had multiple 30-point games. He is definitely somebody that I would at least ask what it would require in order to get him. I think they have a variety of wings who could really help this team, though, in Sacramento, who's very weak at wing depth, whether it's Kelly Oubre or Miles Bridges or even Gordon Hayward. I think they have a lot of really good offensive options. None of them are like the defensive standouts that you would really want to get if you're the Sacramento Kings, but you certainly don't not take this phone call.
Yeah, I agree 100% of the way. They've been rumored to be interested in Rashaan Holmes at this point. Not sure if anything will materialize, but I think you hit it right on the head there. Miles Bridges and Kelly Oubre are on the top of my list. We need to add some wing depth to this Sacramento Kings roster.
Let's take our next GM phone call here, and it is Bob Myers of the San Francisco / Golden State Warriors.
Well, like you, I'm also picking up the call because as the Kings, you need to do your due diligence and you need to get every bit of information, every bit of offers that you can to make the best decision. But if there's one guy that really stands out to me on this Golden State roster, that is James Wiseman. I think this guy is really young. He has a ton of potential. He's a guy that I would look to add if this Kings team was shifting towards a rebuild. I'm not sure exactly what he offers this Warriors team as far as once they make the playoffs and their championship hopes this season, but he could do a lot for a young Sacramento Kings team looking to build towards the future.
No, I agree with you completely. I think the Warriors roster has plenty of players that I would definitely take a flyer on. Most of them are their younger players here, which who knows whether or not they're going to be willing to part with people like Jonathan Kuminga or Moses Moody. Moody is a guy that really hasn't even gotten that much playing time with the big league club. He's been mostly a G League Santa Cruz Warrior for most of the season, especially now that Jordan Poole has elevated his game and Klay Thompson is back and starting for the Warriors. But you're right, James Wiseman would be somebody I would be interested in. Jonathan Kuminga was my favorite player coming out of the draft from last year. I would absolutely be interested in him. Even players like Juan Toscano-Anderson, who I think is very undervalued, doesn't put up crazy numbers on this team, but is an incredibly important role player. Again, fills wing depth. He's a good defender. He's a great athlete, an improved outside shooter. And we're talking about one of the best franchises in the NBA. So taking any one of those players off that roster, I think would be an improvement to the culture of the Sacramento basketball team.
I agree. Looks like we got another call coming in here, Calvin. It is Neil from Portland. He sounds distraught. He sounds not happy with the current season for the Trailblazers. I know you're picking up the call. What are you asking for?
Well, he should be distraught first and foremost. Injuries have been absolutely catastrophic to this team. A team that has made the playoffs a record 8 consecutive seasons, or the longest standing playoff streak of any team in the Western Conference. But they do not look like the Portland Trailblazers that we have come to know and love. Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum have both been out for extended periods of time. Again, I think that this roster has a lot of pieces that the Kings could use. Whether you're willing to make a big deal for somebody like C.J. McCollum, or if you think that even Damian Lillard is somebody that you're able to pry away from this team. I think Jusuf Nurkic could be somebody that the Kings could look at as putting into their starting lineup at center. You even have guys like Nasir Little, again, who fill wing depth, not like one of the top players on my wish list here in a trade, but you got to take this phone call. There are opportunities here for you to improve. Robert Covington is another guy that I know you like a lot.
Yeah, Portland, as you mentioned, has been a great team over the last 8 seasons or so. They're dealing with a ton of injuries this season. I would love no more than to have a guy like Dame Lillard on the Sacramento Kings. I'd also welcome a trade to a guy like CJ McCollum, but I think both of those guys are probably not achievable at this point. So I'm going to circle Robert Covington and Jusuf Nurkic. I think these guys are huge role players. They could even do a little bit more than that, and I think the Kings could benefit greatly having some of these guys. It would really help them play much better defense, and they can both shoot as well, Cal.
They sure can. And neither of us even mentioned Anthony Simons, who is my favorite player in terms of people that you would look to try to acquire from the Portland Trailblazers. I just don't know how likely that is at this point. We got one more phone call to take here, and it is Scott Perry from the New York Knicks. It's rumored earlier this week that Julius Randle might be available for the Knicks, from the Knicks. Barry, is Julius somebody that you're trying to go after?
Well, I think Orange Julius sounds much better than Purple Julius, but they must have seen our NBA 2K rebuild, Calvin, that we did about a month and a half ago, where we traded for Julius Randle and we took the Kings to the playoffs. I really like Julius Randle a lot, but I'm not so sure about the Kings trading for him. There are a few different guys on this Knicks roster that I do like Nerlens Noel. Everybody likes RJ Barrett. They just got a guy like Cam Reddish, so he's probably not available as well. But it would be an interesting conversation for me with the Knicks. I'd probably lean more towards draft picks. If you were to look at the past, 10 or so seasons of Knicks basketball, they've been worse, better than they've done well. Maybe last season was an abnormality. I'm not really sure. I'd also be interested in trading for their head coach.
Yeah, we would definitely love to have a guy like Tom Thibodeau leading the Kings. Leading is the key word in that sentence. But I'm not so sure that you don't take a flyer on Julius Randle here. I mean, the guy has obviously steadily improved over the course of his career. He was most improved player last season, made an all-star team. He really revived a Knicks franchise that has been bad for not quite as long as Sacramento, but it certainly feels that way, I'm sure, to a lot of Knicks fans. This is a guy who would solidify the power forward position. Really, really solid all-around scorer, has a very complete game. At this point, I don't know if you can say that you don't take a flyer on him just because of where the Kings are. We talk about making a splash, trying to get that extra really, really good or above average player to pair along with whether it's Darren Fox or Tyrese Halliburton or both of them. So I think if the Kings had an opportunity for someone like that, especially if it fits a positional need, then you should definitely take a look at that trade.
Yeah, I would be open. It's just a matter of what it would cost to get a guy like that. When I look at the Knicks, he seems like their prize player. A lot of people would argue that it's RJ Barrett, but Julius Randle has really been the guy that's led them towards this
difference maker for sure.
Success as of lately. And that just makes me think that maybe he's going to cost a lot more. I do like Emmanuel Quigley a lot. I'd be interested in him as well. But we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to jump into my favorite section of the show, where we take questions from you, the fans.
Welcome back to the Royal Report. We're ringing the bell. It is time to answer all your burning Sacramento Kings basketball questions here on a section we like to call Cowbell Questions. Let's kick it off with our first here from producer Vinny.
Why not play Tyrese at the 3 and put Davion at the 2 with De'Aaron at the 1? Tyrese is a little undersized at the 3, but we're putting our best players on the court. What do we have to lose?
I think you have a lot of bench production to lose. I mean, for me, I like all three of these guys. I think that they're all starters in the league, or they're well on their way, and that's basically just talking about Davion Mitchell here. But my main concern with Buddy Hield is going to be your main ball handler off the bench, and we've all seen how that's worked out.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Buddy Hield should never be the primary ball handler on any team. The question, what do you have to lose? The answer is really nothing. You don't have that much to lose other than more games, which at this point, I don't know if that's really losing that much. You are putting what you would believe to be your 5 best players on the floor, assuming that you're putting Harrison Barnes at the 4 and Rashaan Holmes at the 5. The problem is the Kings, when they've played their best this season, they haven't used anything like that lineup. They've played a much more traditional lineup where you had more size at the 3 and the 4. They've kind of stayed away from that small ball lineup, and they've used the tandem of Buddy Hield and Davion Mitchell off the bench to provide a big spark scoring-wise, which is why one of the biggest strengths of this team all year long, when fully healthy, has been their bench.
I mean, at this point, I'm willing to try anything, so, why not? Why not? But thank you, BV50, for your question. It is much appreciated. Next question.
Are you giving up on the Kings?
Man, this is a tough question. No, the answer will never be that I'm giving up on the Kings, but I feel like every person has their breaking point, right? I mean, I'll give you an example here. Everybody that has watched this channel for a while knows that I'm a really big University of Michigan sports fan. Coming into this season, I was incredibly high on the basketball team. They're coming off a long stretch of success. They've made 2 national championship games since 2013. So I was really, really high on them. They got Juwan Howard as coach. They have all these great players, blah, blah, blah. The football team on the other side was 2-6 last season. It's one of the worst years in program history. Fast forward to the end of the season, the football team is in the college football playoff, and the basketball team is a shell of itself. I haven't watched any Michigan basketball games, even though I'm still a big supporter of the team, and I kind of feel that that's where I'm at with this Kings team now. We've seen enough. We know that it doesn't work. We're ready for change. We're ready for whatever that may mean, bringing in Ben Simmons, continuing to lose for bigger draft picks. We want to see something done differently rather than the same starting 5 or the same group of players rolled out night after night after night as they continue to lose more and more hope, Barry.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I'm never giving up on this Kings team as a team in general. However, I might have given up on the season already. I'm still going to be watching the games. I'm still going to be doing post games. However, my hopes of them making the playoffs this season and ending that 15-year streak are crushed at this point, Calvin.
On that note, next question.
Higher ceiling, Jones or Keta?
That's an interesting one. I've seen a lot of good plays from both of these guys. I'd love to see a little bit more from Keita. I think I do have to go with him on this point just because there's a lot more questions and mysteriousness around him. I love the defensive potential. I love what I've seen in the G League. I think they're both going to be valuable pieces, and I'd like to hold on to both of them. I think the Kings could really benefit in the future from having both of these guys, but I got to go with Keita right now as a bigger ceiling.
I agree with you in that I need to see more from both of these players. Really, neither one of them I feel like has been given the real opportunity to show what they can do in the NBA. Certainly, you can go off of prior videos or footage, whether it's in the league or at the G League level or in college, and you can try to determine which one has the higher ceiling. Both of them have a very similar skill set, though. They're good athletic big men. I think Damian Jones is a little bit more athletic than Keita, but he's also not quite as big. Keita provides traditionally or in his previous play the better rim protection. Both of them, I think, move their feet pretty well as big men. Damian Jones has showed flashes of having a really nice outside jump shot for a big man. So both of these guys, I feel like, are in very similar positions currently. They just both need to get on the floor more for you to really make a determination as to who is the better long-term answer. So right now, I really can't pick between one or the other.
Okay.
That is all the time that we have for Cowbell Questions. Thank you again for your submissions. If you would like to hear Barry and I answer one of your questions on a future show, just write it down in the comments section below this video and hashtag it Cowbell Questions.
Thank you guys so much for your questions. We're wrapping up the show pretty soon here, but I think it's important to touch on a subject that many Kings fans have very near and dear to their heart, and that is Darren Fox. He has now missed the last 3 games after tweaking his ankle in warmups. That's including a 53-point blowout where the Kings were down by 60, another game where they were down by 30. They haven't won a single one of these 3 games. He's averaging 21 and 3.8 rebounds, 5.2 assists on the season. That's his lowest assist count since his rookie season. He just signed a brand new 5-year, $163 million max contract with the Kings. He's on the very first year of that, which more money, more problems, as they say. The Kings are 1-6 without Fox this season, Calvin, and they are currently in a downward spiral. So my question to you is, when can we expect to see him back? And if you were him, would you even want to come back at this point?
Well, I think that last part is a very true statement to think about. If you're Darren Fox, do you want to come back and play for this team the way that they have looked over the past couple of weeks? At the same time, if you're a competitor, you should absolutely want to get back out there as the leader of this team. This is an opportunity to prove yourself as a franchise player or as the dog or the leader that all of us Kings pundits have been talking about ad nauseum, in the fact that the Kings have been missing that type of person for so long. This is a perfect opportunity for Darren Fox to assert himself in that role. But at the end of the day, is it going to result in more wins? Is it going to change the overall situation of this team with the way it's currently constructed? I'm not so sure that it is. So do I expect to see him play again this season? Absolutely. But I do think that it is a very interesting timing for him to choose to sit out with a sore ankle for these 3 consecutive games, given the fact that 2 of them were two of their biggest losses of the entire season.
And it's leading up to the trade deadline. He's been mentioned in all these trade rumors. I don't know if him sitting makes that worse or better, but it's pretty clear without Darren Fox, the Kings are lost, and they're even lost with him at this point, Calvin.
Yes, it is a very difficult situation. But again, hey, Monty, let's get some help around these guys. Well, the Kings do have some more games to play, so we'll look ahead to the next week of Kings basketball here. It is another very, very difficult stretch. Games against teams like the Warriors, like the Nets, like the Knicks. Barry, we just saw the Kings in the last 2 weeks lose to the 2 worst teams in basketball, or 2 of the 3 worst teams in basketball, and then follow that up with 2 of the most colossal losses that the franchise may have ever seen in some points. Yes, they made it sort of respectable at the end against the Hawks, but this team just looks completely in disarray at this point. Is there any reason to expect that they can beat any of these teams this week?
That's a very tough question to answer, Calvin. So 4 games this week. The Sixers are up on Saturday. Make sure you guys catch us post-game for that one. The Sixers just defeated the Lakers, the LeBron-less Lakers, last night, seeing Anthony Davis hurt that wrist there. They have really been playing well as of late, and as you mentioned early on in the show, Joel Embiid is looking like an MVP candidate. And after every game, he's saying, Ben who? Ben who? I don't know. Ben who? Then they follow that up in New York against the Knicks. The Knicks are struggling. However, they are still 23-26 on the season. They play great defense. They are definitely trying to fight back into 500 basketball and playoff contention. So they have everything to prove, and the Kings have nothing to prove at this point before returning home against a Nets team who many have picked as a title favorite at the beginning of the season. However, they are dealing with drama surrounding Kyrie Irving, injuries to guys like Kevin Durant, and potentially losing James Harden at the end of this season. It is a home game for Sacramento, so that does mean that Kyrie Irving could be eligible to play. It's another tough game for Sacramento. And then they follow that up in Golden State against the Warriors, a really, really good basketball team who just got Klay Thompson back, and they are playing like they want to be in the finals, Calvin.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough week. I think all Kings fans would welcome the drama that the Brooklyn Nets are dealing with right now compared to what's going on in Sacramento.
You got a prediction on this week of basketball?
It's really hard for me to not say 0-4. I just don't see how the Kings can beat any of these teams. Like, they have a decent shot against the Knicks. I would feel that the Knicks are a team that got off to a really hot start, but they've struggled very, very much so over the past couple of months of the season, and now their team seems to be in disarray in terms of, maybe their best players are on the trading block, all that stuff. Kemba Walker has been a big hit or miss guy. Derrick Rose has been out for an extended period of time. So if I had to pick what the most likely game the Kings could win out of these four would be, it would definitely be that game. But they're certainly going to have their hands full in all four of these matchups. They're going to have their hands full in every matchup for the rest of the season, in my opinion.
Yep, I totally agree. And as Sean Cunningham mentioned, Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox are traveling with the Kings on this road trip. So maybe we will see a big trade here. I don't know if that will be good or bad. The Kings could potentially be playing these 4 games shorthanded players if they are sat due to a trade. It's going to be another exciting week of Kings basketball, whether it's on the court or off the court. Maybe we will see a big move here, but we want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Royal Report. I had a good time. I know you did, Cal. I hope you did as well in the audience. We will see you all next week, and make sure you catch us on Saturday for post game after the Sixers game. Maybe we can report on a trade. Who knows? But thank you all so much. Make sure you smash up that like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, go Kings.